Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Harmony, watching the strange alien vessels approach through the darkness of space. 3 months had passed since humanity first detected the signals from this distant star system. Now, face to face with beings from another world, Jake felt his heart beating fast in his chest. The alien ships looked nothing like human vessels. They were made of what seemed like crystal or glass, shaped like giant snowflakes that sparkled with their own inner light. Each ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Harmony. As they moved closer, the crystal ships made no sound, but somehow Jake could feel a low humming in his bones. "Captain, they're sending us a message," said Communications Officer Tony Garcia from his station. His voice was steady, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath. "It's coming through in perfect English." "Put it through," Jake ordered, straightening. His uniform. This was the moment that would go down in history books. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the strangest being Jake had ever seen. The alien was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal. Its body was translucent blue-white, and light seemed to flow through it like water. Where a human would have a face, there were patterns of light that shifted and changed. As it spoke, "Greetings, beings of the vessel Harmony," the alien said. Its voice was clear, but had an odd musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We are the Zelani. We have observed your species from a distance and find you ... puzzling." Jake stepped forward. "I am Captain Sullivan of the Earth vessel Harmony. We come in peace, hoping to establish friendly relations between our peoples." The Zelani's light patterns shifted in what might have been curiosity. "Peace is logical. We too seek understanding. But we must know, why do your people create sounds that serve no purpose? Why do you move your bodies in patterns that accomplish nothing? Our studies of your transmitted signals show much of this behavior." Jake exchanged glances with his crew. Cultural Ambassador Lisa Monroe stepped up beside him. She was a small woman with kind eyes who had spent years studying alien psychology, though no one had expected to need that knowledge so soon. "You mean our music and dancing?" Lisa asked gently. "These things bring us joy. They help us express our feelings and connect with each other." The Zelani was silent for a long moment. Its light patterns swirled faster, almost frantically. "Joy, feelings, these concepts do not translate well. We have eliminated such inefficiencies from our society long ago. We exist to learn, to grow in knowledge and logical understanding. Yet, ... the alien paused. "Your signals create resonances in our crystal matrix that we cannot explain." Commander Rick Torres, Jake's second-in-command, spoke up. "What kind of resonances?" "When we intercept your music transmissions, our molecular structure vibrates in harmony. It is ... disturbing. We had thought such responses were removed from our evolution centuries ago. We wish to understand this phenomenon." Lisa's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. "You're saying our music affects you physically?" "Correct. Most recently, we intercepted a transmission featuring a stringed instrument combined with rhythmic body movements. The effect was strongest with this signal. Our Science Council finds this most perplexing." Jake saw Lisa's face change. She looked excited and nervous at the same time. "Captain, may I?" She gestured toward her personal tablet. Jake nodded. Lisa quickly pulled up a file from the ship's cultural database. "This might be what you detected," she said, turning the tablet toward the screen. "This is a recording from Earth of a violin performance combined with dance." The moment the music began to play, something incredible happened. The Zelani on the screen went completely still. The flowing lights in its body stopped moving and began to pulse in rhythm with the music. Even more amazing, through the viewports, Jake could see the crystal ships outside, beginning to glow brighter. The violin's sweet melody filled the bridge of the Harmony. It was a piece that combined classical technique with modern dance movements, the kind of performance that had become popular on Earth in recent decades. The musician moved gracefully while playing, her body telling a story that the music enhanced. When the brief clip ended, the silence stretched for nearly a minute. The Zelani's light patterns were moving in ways they had not seen before, swirling and dancing through its crystal body. What was that? The alien finally asked, and for the first time, its voice carried something that sounded almost like emotion. That was art, Lisa said softly. It's what we create when we want to share beauty with others. The violin makes the music, and the dance shows the feelings the music creates. Impossible, the Zelani said, but its tone suggested it was not. Entirely convinced of its own words. Beauty is not quantifiable. Feelings are inefficient biological responses. Yet when we experienced your art, our entire fleet resonated as one. Some of our younger generation reported sensations they could not identify. Sensations that our elders claimed to remember from before a great logical awakening. Jake realized they were witnessing something historic. These aliens, who claimed to have eliminated emotion from their society, were being affected by human art in ways they could not understand or control. Perhaps, Lisa suggested carefully, you once had art of your own, before your logical awakening? The Zelani's lights dimmed slightly. Such records are classified. What you suggest is theoretically possible, but irrelevant to our current existence. Is it? Rick Torres asked. If our music affects you so strongly, maybe it's not as irrelevant as you think. The alien was quiet again. Through the viewports, Jake could see more crystal ships arriving. The entire Zelani fleet was gathering, drawn by something they could not name but could not ignore. We propose an exchange, the Zelani finally said. We will share our scientific knowledge with you. In return, we request that you help us understand this art phenomenon. Specifically, we wish to study the creator of the violin dance performance that so affected our systems. Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded eagerly. We would be honored to arrange such an exchange. The artist you saw is named Katie Walsh. She's currently on Earth, but I believe we could arrange for her to join a cultural mission. This is acceptable? We will prepare facilities for a formal exchange. But Captain Sullivan, understand this. What you call art may have awakened something in our people that has slept for 1,000 years. The consequences of this awakening are unknown, even to us. As the transmission ended and the crystal ships began to move into formation around the Harmony, Jake realized that humanity had just taken its first step into a much larger universe. And somehow, it was not their technology or their weapons that had opened this door. It was a young woman, with a violin and the courage to dance while she played. Katie Walsh was practicing in her small apartment when the call came that changed her life forever. She had just finished playing a complex piece that mixed classical violin with her own modern dance moves when her phone rang. A caller ID showed a number she did not recognize, but something told her to answer it anyway. Hello, is this Katie Walsh? The voice on the other end was formal and serious. Yes, this is Katie. Who is this? My name is Dr. Margaret Foster from the Earth Space Administration. Miss Walsh, I know this will sound strange, but we need your help with something very important. Something involving first contact with an alien species. Katie nearly dropped her violin. I'm sorry, what did you say? Can you come to the ESA headquarters in New York tomorrow? I promise I will explain everything then. But Miss Walsh, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. 3 days ago, our ship Harmony made contact with aliens called the Zelani. They specifically requested to meet the artist from a violin performance they intercepted. From our transmissions, that artist is you. Katie sat down hard on her couch. This has to be a joke. I understand this is difficult to believe. But Miss Walsh, these aliens have technology far beyond ours. They could destroy us easily if they wanted to. Instead, they want to learn about human art. Your art. You might be the key to peaceful relations between our species. The next morning, Katie found herself in a government building that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Dr. Foster met her at the entrance. She was a tall woman with gray hair and kind eyes that looked very tired. Thank you for coming, Katie. I know this is overwhelming. Katie followed Dr. Foster through hallways filled with people in uniforms and suits, all looking very busy and serious. They entered a conference room where several other people were waiting. Katie, I want you to meet some people, Dr. Foster said. This is Colonel Bill Parker, who will be commanding the mission. This is Dr. Sarah Kim, our leading expert on alien psychology. And this is Professor Alex Chun, who has been studying your work. Professor Chun stood up and shook Katie's hand. He was an older man with a gentle smile. Katie, I've been following your career since you started performing 3 years ago. Your style of combining classical violin with contemporary dance is truly unique. I believe it represents the evolution of human artistic expression. I still don't understand why aliens would care about my music, Katie said. Sitting down at the conference table, Colonel Parker activated a large screen on the wall. Let me show you something that might help explain. The screen showed the bridge of a spaceship. Katie could see Captain Sullivan and his crew talking to something that looked like a living crystal. When the alien spoke, its voice had a strange musical quality that made Katie's skin tingle. We intercepted a transmission featuring a stringed instrument combined with rhythmic body movements, the alien was saying. The effect was strongest with this signal. Then Katie saw herself on the screen. It was a recording from one of her performances last year, where she had played a piece she composed while dancing around the stage. She watched herself move gracefully while her violin sang, her body telling a story that the music enhanced. Moment her performance began playing, something amazing happened. A crystal alien went completely still, and lights began flowing through its body in rhythm with the music. Katie could see the alien ships outside the spaceship's windows beginning to glow brighter. When the recording ended, Katie sat in stunned silence. The Zalani claim they eliminated all emotion from their society centuries ago, Dr. Kim explained. But your music affects them in ways they cannot understand or control. Their entire fleet resonated when they heard your performance. They want to meet you, Colonel Parker said. They want to understand what they call the art phenomenon. Katie, you could be humanity's first cultural ambassador to an alien species. Katie felt her hands shaking. But I'm just a musician. I'm only 19 years old. I play violin and I dance. I'm not a diplomat or a scientist. Professor Chun leaned forward. Katie, that's exactly why you're perfect for this. The Zalani are beings of pure logic who have forgotten how to feel. But somehow, your art reaches them. You don't need to be a diplomat. You just need to be yourself. What would I have to do? Katie asked quietly. Dr. Foster pulled out a thick folder. We want you to join a cultural exchange mission to the Zalani homeworld. You would travel on our fastest ship with a full crew of scientists and cultural experts. Your job would be to perform for the Zalani and help them understand human art. How long would I be gone? The journey each way takes 6 months. You would spend at least 3 months on their planet, so about 15 months total. Katie thought about her life on Earth. She had a small apartment, a few close friends, and a music career that was just starting to take off. But she also had dreams of doing something important with her music, something that mattered. What if I mess this up? What if my music doesn't affect them the same way when I'm there in person? And we'll figure out something else, Colonel Parker said. But Katie, These aliens specifically asked for you. They could have asked for our best scientists or our political leaders. Instead, they asked for an artist. That tells us something important about what they need." Professor Chun smiled. "Katie, I've spent my whole career studying how art affects people. Your style is special because it combines technical skill with pure emotional expression. When you play, you don't just make music, you share your soul. That's what the Zalani are responding to." Katie looked around the room at all these important people who were asking her to do something that seemed impossible. Then she thought about the crystal alien on the screen, how its lights had danced to her music, how its voice had carried something that almost sounded like wonder. "If I say yes, what happens next?" Dr. Foster smiled for the first time since Katie had met her. "We start preparing you for the most important performance of your life. You'll work with our best engineers to adapt your equipment for space travel. You'll study Zalani culture and psychology. And you'll practice playing music that might wake up an entire civilization that has forgotten how to dream." Katie took a deep breath. She thought about all the great artists throughout history who had used their talents to bring people together, to create understanding between different groups. Now she had a chance to do that on a scale no human had ever attempted. "When do we leave?" she asked. The room erupted in smiles and congratulations. Katie Walsh, 19-year-old violinist from Brooklyn, had just agreed to become humanity's first interstellar cultural ambassador. She had no idea that her decision would change not just her own life, but the fate of 2 entire civilizations. The journey to the Zalani homeworld began on a cold Tuesday morning in March. Katie stood at the window of her cabin aboard the starship Harmony, watching Earth grow smaller until it was just a blue dot among the stars. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered goodbye to everything she had ever known. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Katie turned to see Amy Foster, the ship's navigation officer. Amy was about Katie's age, with short red hair and a friendly smile that made Katie feel less alone. "It's scary," Katie admitted. "I keep thinking I must be crazy to leave home for something I don't even understand." Amy sat down in the chair next to Katie's bed. "We're all a little scared. None of us have ever met aliens before. But Captain Sullivan says you're the reason they want to talk to us, instead of just studying us from far away. That makes you pretty special." Over the next few weeks, Katie settled into life aboard the Harmony. The ship was much larger than she had expected, with over 200 crew members. There were scientists, engineers, doctors, and military personnel, all working together to make the mission successful. Katie's favorite part of the ship was the observation deck that the engineers had modified just for her. It was a large room, with windows on all sides, giving her a full view of space. The engineers had installed special sound equipment that could record her music and transmit it to the Zalani ships that followed them at a distance. Every day, Katie practiced for hours. In the observation deck, she worked on new pieces that combined her violin skills with dance movements, always trying to create something that would help the Zalani understand human emotions. The crew often gathered to watch her practice, and Katie noticed that her music seemed to affect everyone differently. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Steve Cooper was fascinated by how Katie's performances changed people's moods. He set up equipment to monitor the crew's brain activity while Katie played. "It's remarkable," he told Katie one day. "Your music doesn't just make people happy or sad. It creates complex emotional responses that I've never seen before." "What do you mean?" Katie asked, wiping sweat from her forehead after a particularly intense practice session. "When you play that piece you wrote about loneliness, people don't just feel sad. They feel connected to everyone else who has ever been lonely. When you play the joyful pieces, people don't just smile. They remember happy moments from their own lives. Your music creates empathy." Katie had never thought about her music that way before. She had always played from her heart, letting her emotions flow through her violin and her movements. But now she realized that what she felt when she played somehow became what other people felt when they listened. Tony Garcia, the communications officer, spent hours each day talking to the Zelani fleet that followed them through space. He told Katie that the aliens sent increasingly complex messages as they got closer to their destination. They're describing your practice sessions as pattern storms that reorganize thought crystals, Tony explained during dinner one evening. I'm not sure what that means, but they seem very excited about it. Excited? Katie asked. I thought they didn't have emotions. That's what they claim, said Dr. Sarah Kim, the alien psychology expert. But their language has been changing. 3 months ago, their messages were purely factual. Now they use words that suggest feelings, even though they probably don't. Realize it. As the months passed, Katie began to understand that she was not just traveling to meet aliens. She was carrying something precious from Earth, the ability to feel deeply and express those feelings through art. The responsibility felt enormous, but also inspiring. Danny Martinez, the ship's engineer, became one of Katie's closest friends during the journey. He was a quiet man who loved to solve technical problems, and he spent countless hours making sure Katie's equipment would work perfectly on the alien world. The Zelani homeworld has a different atmosphere than Earth, Danny explained, while adjusting Katie's violin. The air is thinner, and the gravity is slightly stronger. I've modified your instrument to compensate for these changes. What if it changes how my music sounds? Katie worried. Danny smiled. Music is more than just sound waves, Katie. It's about what you put into it. The Zelani aren't just hearing your notes. They're feeling your soul. That won't change no matter what planet you're on. One day, about 4 months into the journey, something unexpected happened. Katie was practicing a new piece she had composed about the loneliness of space travel, when suddenly the ship's lights began to flicker in rhythm with her music. The crew gathered on the observation deck, staring in amazement as the entire ship seemed to pulse with Katie's melody. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We are receiving a transmission from the Zelani fleet. They're asking if our ship is trying to communicate with them through harmonic resonance. Katie stopped playing, and the lights returned to normal. What does that mean? She asked. Dr. Kim looked excited. I think it means your music is so powerful that it's affecting our ship's systems, and the Zelani can detect it from millions of miles away. Katie, you're not just preparing to meet them. You're already communicating with them. As they entered the final month of their journey, Katie could see the Zelani homeworld growing larger in the observation deck windows. It was a beautiful planet that seemed to be made entirely of crystal formations that caught and reflected the light of its sun. The Zelani ships that surrounded them looked like they were part of the planet itself, as if they had grown from the same crystalline structures. Katie spent her final weeks of travel practicing the most important performance of her life, had composed a special piece that told the story of humanity's journey to the stars, their hopes and fears, their capacity for love and wonder. She called it The Song of Two Worlds. The night before they were scheduled to land on the Zelani homeworld, Katie couldn't sleep. She went to the observation deck and played softly to herself, looking out at the alien planet that would soon be her temporary home. Amy Foster found her there an hour before dawn. How are you feeling? Amy asked. Katie looked at the crystal planet spinning slowly outside the windows. Like I'm about to find out if music really is universal, or if I'm just a human girl with a violin who's about to disappoint an entire alien civilization. You won't disappoint them, Amy said firmly. You've already awakened something in them that they thought was lost forever. Tomorrow, you're going to show them that feelings aren't weaknesses to be eliminated. their strengths to be celebrated. As the Harmony prepared to land on the Zelani homeworld, Katie Walsh held her violin close and whispered a prayer to whatever forces in the universe had brought her to this moment. In a few hours, she would discover whether human art could truly bridge the gap between species, or whether some differences were too great to overcome. The Zelani homeworld was unlike anything Katie had ever imagined. As the shuttle carried her and the diplomatic team down from the Harmony, she pressed her face to the window and stared in wonder at the crystal city below them. Every building, every street, every structure was made of the same translucent material as the Zelani themselves. The entire city sparkled like a giant jewel in the light of the alien sun. "It's beautiful," Katie whispered to Captain Sullivan, who sat beside her in the shuttle. "Just remember," the captain said quietly, "we're not tourists here. Everything depends on how well your performance goes today." The shuttle landed in what seemed to be the center of the crystal city. As Katie stepped out, carrying her violin case, she could see thousands of Zelani gathering around a massive amphitheater that had been built specifically for her performance. The aliens moved with a strange flowing grace, their crystal bodies catching and reflecting light as they walked. Elder Zelani Vex Prime approached the human delegation. Vex Prime was taller than the other aliens, and the lights that flowed through its body were brighter and more complex. When it spoke, its voice had the same musical quality Katie remembered from the transmissions, but somehow deeper and more resonant. "Welcome to our world, beings of Earth," Vex Prime said. "We have prepared the great amphitheater for the performance ritual. Our entire population wishes to witness this phenomenon you call art." Katie looked at the amphitheater and felt her heart skip a beat. It was enormous, easily large enough to hold 50,000 beings. The walls were made of crystal that curved upward in perfect spirals, and she could see that every surface was designed to amplify and modify sound waves. "Will all of those Zelani be affected by my music?" Katie asked Dr. Kim in a whisper. "We don't know," Dr. Kim admitted. "This is the first time so many of them will experience human art at once. We have no idea what might happen." As Katie was led to a preparation area behind the amphitheater, she could hear the Zelani gathering. Their crystal bodies made soft chiming sounds as they moved, creating a gentle background melody that seemed to welcome her. But she could also sense something else: tension, anticipation, and what almost felt like fear. A younger Zelani approached Katie while she prepared her violin. This one was smaller than Vex Prime, and its light patterns moved faster and more chaotically than the others. "I am called Harmony Singer," the young alien said, and Katie noticed that its voice had a different quality than the elders. "I volunteered to assist you during the performance. I must confess, I am experiencing sensations I do not understand." "What kind of sensations?" Katie asked gently. "When I heard your transmitted music, my crystal matrix began to resonate in patterns that have no logical purpose. Our medical evaluators say this is impossible, yet it continues to happen. I find myself ... curious about these feelings." Katie smiled. "That's exactly what music is supposed to do. It makes you feel things you didn't know you could feel." "But why?" Harmony Singer asked. "What is the purpose of these sensations if they serve no logical function?" Katie thought for a moment. Maybe the purpose is just to be alive, to know that you're more than just thoughts and logic. Music reminds us that we have hearts as well as minds. Danny Martinez finished setting up Katie's sound equipment while Amy Foster and Tony Garcia worked with Zelani technicians to make sure the performance would be recorded properly. The crystal amphitheater had natural acoustic properties that were beyond anything humans had ever built, and the combination of human technology with Zelani architecture created something entirely new. "Katie," Captain Sullivan said, "it's time." "Katie, walked into the amphitheater carrying her violin, and the sight that greeted her took her breath away. Thousands upon thousands of Zilani filled every level of the crystal structure. Their bodies created a sea of soft light that pulsed gently in the alien twilight. The silence was complete, except for the gentle chiming of their movements. Vex Prime's voice echoed through the amphitheater. Beings of our world, we gather to witness a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of existence. The human Katie Walsh will demonstrate what her species calls art. We do not know what effects this will have upon us. Observe and record all sensations. Katie stood in the center of the amphitheater and looked up at the alien audience. For a moment, she felt completely overwhelmed. These beings had eliminated emotion from their lives centuries ago. What if her music meant nothing to them? What if she had traveled across the galaxy only to fail at the most important moment? Then she remembered what Professor Chun had told her back on Earth. She didn't need to be a diplomat or a scientist. She just needed to be herself. She raised her violin to her shoulder, closed her eyes, and began to play. The first notes of The Song of Two Worlds floated through the crystal amphitheater, and immediately Katie knew something magical was happening. The Zilani crystal structures began to resonate with her music, amplifying and harmonizing with every note. But more than that, she could feel the aliens themselves beginning to respond. As Katie moved into the dance portion of her performance, swaying and stepping in rhythm with her music, something incredible began to happen. The Zilani started to move. At first, it was just a gentle swaying, as if they couldn't help themselves. But as the music grew more complex and emotional, their movements became more pronounced. The lights flowing through their crystal bodies began to pulse in rhythm with Katie's violin. Colors that Katie had never seen before rippled through the audience like waves on an ocean. The entire amphitheater became a living symphony of light and sound. Katie played her heart out, pouring every emotion she had ever felt into her performance. She played about loneliness and friendship, about fear and courage, about the beauty of Earth and the wonder of space. She played about what it meant to be human, to feel deeply, to create art for no reason other than the joy of creating. As she reached the climax of her piece, something unprecedented happened. Vex Prime, the ancient elder who had lived for over 2,000 years without emotion, began to weep. Crystal tears fell from its body, chiming softly as they hit the amphitheater. Floored out then, one by one, other Zilani began to cry as well. Soon the entire audience was weeping, their tears creating a gentle rain of crystal music that blended with Katie's violin. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of awakening, of remembering what it felt like to be truly alive. Katie finally lowered her violin. The silence that followed was profound. For several long moments, no one moved. Then Vex Prime stood up, and its voice carried across the amphitheater with a richness and depth that had not been there before. "We understand now," the elder said, and for the first time, its words carried unmistakable emotion. Art is not inefficient. Art is not purposeless. Art is the voice of the soul, and we had forgotten that we have souls. The entire amphitheater erupted in a sound Katie had never heard before, thousands of Zilani expressing joy for the first time in centuries. Their crystal bodies chimed and sang in harmony, creating a symphony of pure happiness that echoed across their entire world. Katie stood in the center of it all, holding her violin and smiling through her own tears. She had done it. She had awakened an entire civilization to the power of feeling, the beauty of emotion, the necessity of art. In that moment, she knew that her journey across the stars had been worth every mile. The days following Katie's performance in the Crystal Amphitheater were unlike anything anyone had expected. The Zilani world had changed overnight, and not everyone was happy about it. Katie woke up in her guest quarters to the sound of crystal chimes coming from outside her window. When she looked out, she saw young Zelani gathered in small groups throughout the Crystal City, creating their own music by touching different parts of their bodies to make harmonic sounds. They moved awkwardly at first, like children learning to walk, but with growing confidence as they discovered the joy of making art. Harmony Singer visited Katie every morning, bringing news of what was happening across their world. The young Zelani's light patterns were brighter now, moving in complex swirls that had never been seen before. The awakening spreads faster than we anticipated, Harmony Singer told Katie on the third day after her performance. Young Zelani, in cities across our planet, are experimenting with what you taught us. They create harmonic sculptures by combining their voices with crystal formations. They move their bodies in rhythmic patterns while generating light displays. It is beautiful. Chaos. That sounds wonderful, Katie said, but she noticed that Harmony Singer seemed worried. Is something wrong? The Council of Logic Prime is concerned. They believe this emotional awakening threatens our ordered society. Logic Prime Keth has called for an immediate halt to all artistic activities. Katie felt her heart sink. She had hoped that awakening the Zelani to art would bring only good things, but she was beginning to understand that change, even positive change, could be frightening for those who had lived the same way for centuries. Captain Sullivan called an emergency meeting that afternoon. The human diplomatic team gathered in their temporary quarters, while Ben Rodriguez, the cultural exchange officer, shared what he had learned from talking to various Zelani groups. The situation is more complex than we realized, Ben explained. The younger Zelani, especially those under 500 years old, are embracing these new artistic experiences. But the older generations, particularly the ruling council, see this as a dangerous regression to primitive behavior. Dr. Kim leaned forward in her chair. What exactly are they afraid of? They're afraid that emotions will make them weak, Ben said. For centuries, they've believed that pure logic made them superior to other species. Now they're seeing their own people cry, laugh, and create art for no practical reason. To them, this looks like madness. Katie stood up and walked to the window, watching young Zelani practice their new art forms in the plaza below. But they're not going mad. They're becoming complete. They're remembering what it means to be alive. Not everyone sees it that way, Captain Sullivan said grimly. Logic Prime Keth has scheduled a formal debate for tomorrow. The council will decide whether to ban all artistic activities and ask us to leave their world. That evening, Katie was practicing in the small performance space the Zelani had built for her when Vex Prime arrived unexpectedly. The ancient elder looked different now. Its light patterns moved more slowly and seemed deeper, more thoughtful than before. May I speak with you, Katie Walsh? Vex Prime asked. Of course, Katie said, setting down her violin. Please, sit down. Vex Prime's crystal form settled into a chair that adjusted itself to accommodate the alien's shape. I have lived for over 2,000 years, the elder began. I remember the time before our great logical awakening, when my people created what you would call art. I was among those who voted to eliminate such activities from our society. Katie waited quietly for Vex Prime to continue. We believed that emotions made us weak. That art was a waste of time and energy. We convinced ourselves that pure logic was evolution, that feelings were primitive holdovers from our barbaric past. The elder's lights dimmed slightly. But when you played your music, I remembered something I had forgotten for centuries. What did you remember? I remembered my name. Before the logical awakening, I was not called Vex Prime. I was called Song of Stars, because I created light music that told stories of our ancestors' journeys through space. When we eliminated emotions, I buried that part of myself so deeply that I forgot it existed. Katie felt tears forming in her eyes. You were an artist. I was. And for 2,000 years, I have felt incomplete without understanding why. Your performance showed me what I had lost, what we had all lost. But now Logic Prime Keth and the Conservative Council want to take that away again. What can we do? Katie asked. Vex Prime's lights brightened with what Katie had learned to recognize as determination. Tomorrow, during the formal debate, I will speak for the artistic awakening. But Katie, I need your help. The council must see that emotions and logic can coexist, that art makes us stronger, not weaker. Katie nodded. What do you need me to do? I need you to perform again. But this time, perform with me. Show them that art is not chaos. It is another form of order, a different kind of truth. The next day, the great council chamber was filled with Zelani from across their world. The chamber itself was a marvel of crystal architecture, designed to amplify both sound and light. Logic Prime Keth stood at the center, its form rigid and dark compared to the other Zelani. We gather to address the crisis that threatens our civilization, Keth announced, its voice cold and emotionless. The human influence has infected our people with primitive emotional responses. These so-called artistic activities serve no logical purpose and threaten to undermine the order we have maintained for centuries. Several conservative Zelani spoke in support of Keth's position, describing the artistic awakening as dangerous madness that would lead to chaos and weakness. Katie watched from the observation area, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Then Vex Prime rose to speak. Honored council members, I ask you to consider a different perspective. For 2,000 years, we have pursued pure logic, believing it made us superior. But we have also become isolated, unable to connect with other species, or even with each other in meaningful ways. The ancient elder's voice grew stronger as it continued. The humans did not make us weak. They reminded us that we are complete beings, capable of both thought and feeling. Art is not the enemy of logic. It is logic's partner in helping us understand the universe. Keth's lights flashed angrily. Emotional responses cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions. Art creates chaos where order should exist. Then let us demonstrate otherwise, Vex Prime said calmly. Katie Walsh, will you join me? Katie stood up, carrying her violin, and walked down to the center of the chamber. The conservative Zelani watched her with suspicion, while the younger ones leaned forward with excitement. I propose a collaboration, Vex Prime announced. Katie will play her human music while I create Zelani light patterns. Together, we will show you that art and logic can work in perfect harmony. Katie raised her violin and began to play a simple, beautiful melody. As the music filled the chamber, Vex Prime began to glow, creating complex patterns of light that danced in perfect synchronization with Katie's notes. The collaboration was breathtaking, human music and Zelani, light art combining to create something neither species could achieve alone. But more importantly, the performance demonstrated perfect order. Every note Katie played matched every light pattern Vex Prime created. The art was structured, logical, and mathematically precise, yet it was also deeply emotional and beautiful. When the performance ended, the chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, even some of the conservative Zelani began to glow softly, their own light patterns responding to what they had witnessed. Logic Prime Keth stood frozen, its rigid form unchanged. But Katie noticed that several other conservative council members were beginning to show the soft, rhythmic light patterns that indicated emotional response. The debate was far from over, but Katie knew they had made an important step. They had shown that art and logic were not enemies, but partners in the greater symphony of existence. The crisis came 3 days after the council debate. Katie woke to the sound of crystal structures collapsing in the distance. When she looked out her window, she saw Logic Prime Keth's forces moving through the city, destroying the artistic creations that young Zelani had built in the past week. Harmony Singer burst into Katie's quarters, its light patterns flashing in distress. "They are banning all chaotic harmonics," the young alien said urgently. "Keth has declared that any Zelani caught creating art will be sent for logic restructuring. They want to erase the parts of our minds that can feel." Katie felt her heart racing. Can they do that? The technology exists. It was used during our original logical awakening centuries ago to remove emotional capacity from our ancestors. Keth believes it is the only way to save our civilization from what he calls the human infection. Captain Sullivan called an emergency meeting within the hour. The human team gathered in their quarters while the sounds of destruction continued outside. Ben Rodriguez had dark circles under his eyes from staying up all night gathering information. "The situation is getting out of hand," Ben reported. "Conservative Zelani forces are moving to arrest any of their people who show signs of artistic behavior. They've already taken several hundred young Zelani for what they call corrective logic treatment." Dr. Kim looked horrified. "They're trying to surgically remove emotions from their own people." "That's exactly what they're doing," Ben confirmed. "And if they succeed, it won't just affect the current generation. They plan to modify their reproduction systems to prevent future Zelani from developing emotional capacity at all." Katie stood up, pacing around the small room. "We have to stop them. These beings just rediscovered what it means to feel, and now their own government wants to take that away forever." "What can we do?" Amy Foster asked. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." Before anyone could answer, Vex Prime entered the room. The ancient elder's light patterns were dim and moved with obvious distress. "I bring grave news. Logic Prime Keth has issued an ultimatum. You must leave our world within 3 solar cycles, or we will be forced to remove you by violent means." Captain Sullivan leaned forward. "What about the Zelani who want to keep their emotions? What happens to them?" "They will be processed for logic restoration. Keth believes this will save our species from the chaos of feeling." Vex Prime's voice carried deep sadness. "I fear we have lost this battle." Katie felt a sudden surge of determination. "No, we haven't lost anything yet. Vex Prime, how many Zelani support the artistic awakening?" "Perhaps half of our population, mostly the younger." "Generations. But they lack organization and leadership to resist the conservative forces." "Then we need to give them both," Katie said firmly. "We need to show every Zelani on this planet what they're about to lose. Not just through words, but through the most powerful art we can create." Chris Thompson, the ship's pilot, spoke up. "What do you have in mind?" Katie walked to the window and looked out at the Crystal City. "The Zelani said my music affects their entire fleet when I play aboard the Harmony. What if we broadcast a performance to every city on their planet at the same time? What if we show them that art isn't chaos, but the highest form of order, the kind that comes from cooperation between different species?" Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "A planetary broadcast could reach millions of Zelani simultaneously." "But Katie, if this doesn't work, we'll have started a civil war. If we do nothing, half their population loses the ability to feel forever," Katie replied. "That's not a choice at all." Vex Prime's lights brightened slightly. "There is a way to reach every Zelani on our world. The crystal network that connects all our cities can carry harmonic frequencies as well as data. But to access it, we would need help from Zelani who work in the communication centers." "I can arrange that," Harmony Singer said from the doorway. Katie hadn't noticed the young alien arrive. "Many of my generation work in technical positions. They will help us if it means saving our ability to create art." The next day, while Logic Prime Keth's forces continued their crackdown on artistic activities. Katie and the human team worked secretly with young Zelani technicians to prepare for the most important performance of her life. Danny Martinez worked with Zelani engineers to modify the Crystal Communication Network, while Rachel Brooks and other security officers helped coordinate with Zelani resistance groups. The plan was risky and complicated. Katie would perform in the central plaza of the Crystal City while their music was broadcast through the Planetary Communication Network. At the same time, Vex Prime and other reformed Zelani would create synchronized light displays in major cities across the planet. The goal was to demonstrate the beauty and power of interspecies cooperation on a scale no one had ever attempted. On the appointed day, Katie stood in the center of the Crystal Plaza with her violin. Around her, thousands of young Zelani had gathered despite the danger of arrest. In the distance, she could see Logic Prime Keth's forces moving toward the plaza, but she knew they wouldn't arrive in time to stop the performance. Vex Prime stood beside her, no longer calling itself by its Logic designation. "I have remembered my true name," the ancient being said. "Today, I am Song of Stars once again, as I was meant to be." Katie raised her violin and began to play the most complex piece she had ever attempted. It was a composition that told the story of two species learning to understand each other, of logic and emotion working together, of the beauty that emerged when different forms of consciousness cooperated instead of fighting. As her music filled the plaza and spread across the planet through the Crystal Network, Song of Stars began to create light patterns of incredible complexity and beauty. Other reformed Zelani in cities across the planet joined in, their combined light displays visible from space as they painted the entire planet with art. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of Zelani across their world stopped what they were doing and watched as their planet became a canvas for the greatest artistic collaboration in their history. Even Logic Prime Keth's forces paused in their advance, staring up at the light displays that turned their entire world into a work of art. But more than the visual beauty, it was the harmony between species that moved the Zelani. They could see that humans and Zelani were not competing but creating together, that art made both species stronger rather than weaker. The performance demonstrated that emotions and logic, when combined, could achieve things that neither could accomplish alone. When Katie finally lowered her violin, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. Then, one by one, Zelani across the world began to create their own light patterns, their own harmonic songs. The planetary artwork continued to grow and evolve as millions of beings added their own voices to the symphony. Logic Prime Keth himself peered in the plaza, surrounded by his conservative forces. But when he spoke, his voice had changed. The rigid coldness was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like wonder. "We understand now," Keth said slowly. "Art is not the absence of order. It is the highest form of order, the kind that emerges when free beings choose to create beauty together." The crisis was over. Within days, the Zelani Council voted to establish the first interspecies arts academy, where humans and Zelani would learn from each other. Katie became humanity's first interstellar cultural ambassador, but more importantly, she had helped an entire civilization remember that the capacity to feel and create was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. As the harmony prepared to return to Earth, Katie stood in the observation deck one last time, watching the Zelani homeworld grow smaller in the distance. But she knew the connection between their species would never fade. The violin's echo would continue to resonate across the stars, carrying the message that art, love, and the courage to feel deeply were truly universal forces that could unite any civilization willing to listen.